I think so. I did this when I discovered this book through Strategic Coach many years ago, and when I did it, I found it really useful. And then I totally forgot about it, and then I came back to it in the last 12 months and thought this is really interesting. And particularly when we were working on the talent tapestry at the last workshop, I think I mentioned this learning lunch because I think the more background and the better we can understand ourselves and our team in terms of their talents, what motivates them, what their kind of underlying strengths and weaknesses are, the better we understand ourselves in that process, the better a leader and the better an entrepreneur we can be. And the better we understand our team, the better we can manage them and build a team that has strengths in different areas. And that's why I really like this book that Gallup produced, which is called Strengths Finder. And I don't know if you know, I've heard of Gallup, but Gallup I have mentioned a few times in a different context in Trusted Team workshops, in that Gallup do a Gallup 12 set of questions, which is the best way I've found to assess how your team feel. Are they happy? Are they motivated? And it's a set of questions that you can ask them every quarter, every year, and there's a whole process that you can go through, and you can pay Gallup to analyze it. But Clifton Strengths Finder is a different tool to this, produced by the same company. And it's a really powerful tool designed to help individuals identify their unique strengths. So by focusing on these strengths, business owners in particular can maximize their potential, improve team dynamics, and achieve better business outcomes. Basically, this whole book is one great big assessment. And what it does is, and I'll explain how that works, but what it does is it reveals an individual's top 5 strengths from a list of 34 themes, providing you with essentially a personalized roadmap for leveraging these strengths in both personal and professional contexts. And at the moment, I am watching it's called 99, documentary or series on Amazon Prime about Manchester United winning the treble in 1999, which I'm really enjoying, by the way. I'm 2 out of 3 episodes in. But I was traveling in Australia at the time that all of that happened. Well, Australia and New Zealand, actually. I think I was in New Zealand when, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. So I was having to watch these games at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And in fact, I missed the Champions League final because I got too drunk and then decided not to stay up for the kickoff. But so it's really good to watch this back again, but also knowing the context of kind of the years leading up to it and what happened afterwards. The reason I mention this is because when you watch, whether it's 99, whether it's reading Sir Alex's book Leading, whether it's watching the David Beckham documentary, one thing everyone talks about around Sir Alex Ferguson, and also when you hear interviews about Sir Alex on things like Diary of a CEO, the thing that he did amazingly well, and the reason that made him so successful, was not that his football tactics were better than anyone else. And his man management was unbelievable. What he would do, so he would go and, like, for example, I think it was Gary Neville, he lost his grandfather at a particular age, and he would just, before the game, he would always touch him on his left shoulder, because that was what Gary Neville associated with his grandfather, touching him on his shoulder. So he knew that for Gary, he needed to do that. For some players, he needed to be really kind of abrupt with them. So Nicky Butt, David Beckham, he was really quite harsh on them at times. Particularly David Beckham refers to that, and obviously you got the hairdryer, the experience, and kicking the boot across the changing room. And yet he also knew that somebody like with Eric Cantona, he needed a very, very different type of nurturing, and it was always he just never seemed to attack him up even after he did his flying kung fu kick at a fan, because he needed a very different type of management to what the other players needed. And I think that this is what highlights how powerful a tool like the Clifton Strengths Finder can be, because it's about managing different people in different ways. And ultimately, your most important player within the team, as far as you're the business concern goes, is yourself. So you need to understand managing yourself as well as the team around you. And so understanding one's strengths is crucial for both personal development and team success. And what I found was Strengths Finder helps individuals recognize their innate talents, enabling them to focus on what they do best. So for business owners, this insight can really lead to better role alignment, increased productivity, and enhanced job satisfaction for them and their team members. And it really just kind of emphasizes the strengths, but also allows you to identify your weaknesses that you can, and it's not really, I suppose it's not really weaknesses, it's the things that are become less happened, or what's the right terminology? It's not so much a weakness, it's what you do less naturally that it highlights as well. So the way it works is it's essentially a book that asks but although now really I think when I did it the second time, it's all, you can do it all online, and it's essentially a series of questions, and ultimately it's looking at your strongest attributes within 4 different domains of leadership. So there's executing, there's influencing, there's relationship building, and there's strategic thinking. And for each of these, it will rank all these 34 strengths from top to bottom. Now, one thing that's worth bearing in mind, if you do this, if you just pay for the normal Strengths Finder, you get your top 5, and then it gives you the summary around those top 5. If you pay for a bolt-on, it will give you the whole 34 ranking and the explanation about the exploration around that. I think that's really important because I'll come on to it in a minute, but it also shows you what's at the bottom of the list, not just what's at the top of the list. But yeah, so each of these themes represent a different talent, such as, achiever, communication, empathy, or strategic. And understanding these themes helps individuals and teams identify where they excel and how they can collaborate more effectively to achieve common goals. So I'm going to use my own Strengths Finder as an example. But one of the places that it starts is it will give you your strengths in each of these different areas. And you can see that I seem to have quite a high bias towards influencing and executing, and relationship building. I'm kind of immediately, it stands out that is a weaker part of my skill set. So that's really interesting. And actually, with the benefit of hindsight, and I did not pick up on that when I did this 15 years ago, but certainly now when I'm doing it, I'm like, okay, that makes so much more sense to me than I realized at the time, initially. So this report serves as a foundation for personal and professional development, guiding you through how to kind of best utilize your strengths. And then what it does is once you've completed the Strengths Finder, it'll dive down into these top 10. So for me, this was activator, maximizer, significance, focus, and futuristic. And as we go through these, and I'm going to tell you a bit about each of the ones that it gives me, and what it, not so that you know anything about me, but more so that you can see the different pieces of information you get for each of these top 5 strengths. And therefore, but also it will be interesting when we get to the end of this for you to tell me whether you see that as being me, because certainly I could see that. So it tells me that my top strength, my number 1 strength, is activator. So this is about people exceptionally talented in the activator theme, wanting to do things now rather than just simply talking about them. It's about taking action. It's about kind of, getting it done yesterday, essentially. So the first thing it does with that is it'll give you a little bit of a deep dive on how that applies to you. So what it told me with activator is, like, its summary sentences: when can we start? Which I could definitely resonate with. And this is a recurring question for anyone that's an activator. So I am impatient for action. While I may concede that analysis has its uses, or that debate and discussion can occasionally yield some valuable insights, deep down, I know that only action is real. Once a decision is made, I must act. Others may worry that we don't have everything that we need in place, or we don't know everything that we need to know, but this just doesn't slow me down. I make a decision, take action, look at the result and learn. The bottom line is this: I know I will be judged not by what I say or what I think, but what I get done. This does not frighten me, it energizes me. So that definitely sounds like me, but that's the description that you're getting within once you start to understand the activator part. Maximizer was my next one. And as well as the information I just gave you on activator, what it does is it then starts to say, well, why is my maximizer unique? So for example, instinctively, I reject using a one-size-fits-all approach when attempting to influence people to take action. Instead, I discover each person's special talents, skills, knowledge, mission, likes, and dislikes. This information helps me personalize the words and deeds that I do. And it gives you a whole list of these. I'll see if there's another short one. It's very likely that you are an effective mentor and trainer. You realize this is your forte, that is your strength. So guess what? That's exactly what we're doing here with the trusted team, isn't it? So it starts to give you sort of a better explanation as to what makes you unique with these strengths. Then what it does is it starts to say, well, okay, how can I apply my significance this trait to succeed? So the next one of my strengths was significance. You'll notice that all these top three so far have been in influencing. You see here we've got influencing. So influence, they're all three influencing. So that kind of says a lot about me, probably why I love Dr. Cialdini's book Influence as much as I do. So how can I apply my significant strength to succeed? Well, I need to make a list of goals that inspire me. As I write down my goals, I will think about my strengths. I will use this list to reflect on my goals and strengths and how that can make the world a better place and how I want others to acknowledge them. I'll also keep in mind that my desire to influence people, groups, and society in a substantial way. This understanding will guide me in identifying goals that align with my aspirations. Well, you guys know from the Trusted Team workshops how I found that goals benefit from me, and having a proper goal-based system has benefited me. So this kind of really ties in well with that. But certainly when I first did this 15 years ago, I didn't heed the advice of StrengthsFinder enough. And really, it was finding this out over the years later that has proved the StrengthsFinder correct. My next strong strength was one in the executing category, which was focused. So this is about following through the actions that you start and making necessary corrections to stay on track. And one of the other things that I think is really helpful with StrengthsFinder is that in your report, it will then start to say, well, how does focus interact with the fact that you are also an activator? So if you take that as an example, when you pair those two together, when you pair your instigation with your concentration, you create a momentum that is always aimed at your goal. And when I combine that focus with maximizer, it's about you give the most of your attention to potential strengths in yourself and others because it promises the best return on investment. So it's really useful in the sense that you can start to go, well, okay, how do these two different strengths combine to make me more powerful? Or what do I need to, how can I use those to succeed more in the future? The final one of mine was futuristic, which based on how much I talk about what we discover at Abundance 360, I don't think will be any surprise to you at all. And so people with a strong futuristic talent love to peer over the horizon. This makes complete sense to me. But it's interesting, particularly when you look back at, well, okay, how did futuristic combine with focus, you can start to say, well, okay, the future dreams become your reality when you concentrate your daily efforts on incremental steps. So that's kind of like, okay, well, this is where when we say, look, it's the little things that we do often that make the biggest successes, not the big things that we do occasionally. So that interaction really, I found really fascinating. But I think probably what I found as fascinating was what was at the bottom of my list. And particularly when I start looking at, so for me, ironically, when I read through this, and I did, like I said, 15 years ago, I did it when I didn't pay for the extended list. I'm not even sure whether that was an option at the time. So I never picked up on what was at the bottom of my list. When I went back and did this a year later and then revisiting again for building this, I actually found that the 30 to 33 at the bottom of my list were the most interesting. Ironically, the 34th I couldn't buy into. I didn't actually buy into what it said about me on that particular one. But I mean, certainly empathy, and I know that, and that's probably because I'm on the spectrum, just my empathy levels with others is not great. And I know when I was financial planning, I had to work really hard on trying to make sure that I did empathize with others, because it doesn't come naturally to me at all. But really being aware of those at the bottom of this and going, well, okay, they're not weaknesses, they're just not my natural strengths. And therefore, if empathy as a blind spot, I mean, I never really realized how empathy was a blind spot until I did the Kinder life planning coaching by George Kinder. And that was really about trying to get to the heart of what a client's worries and concerns and opportunities were, but at a much deeper level than I'd ever done before. And it was at that point that I realized that empathy just did not come naturally to me at all. And so actually being aware of these weaknesses and the things that you have to be, like adaptability, for example, I don't, actually, I realize that I'm not a very adaptable person when it comes to what other people need. So that is a blind spot that I need to be aware of for the future. And so I think this is a really interesting exercise to go through in terms of learning more about yourself and learning how you can design your role to maximize your strengths, and also then thinking about, well, okay, if these are the areas that I'm least strong at, what could I do? Like, for example, going on a Kinder training to help me overcome these weaknesses, if we want to call them weaknesses. I know that they don't like calling them weaknesses, but to me, if they're not a strength, then that's a weakness. But I think what we can also do is start to think about, well, okay, how can we apply this in relationship to the business? So whether that's in terms of team building, building a team that has different strengths, different areas of, and I think we talked about this and I'll come on to Colby and print in a minute, but when we build a team, and I know I've used the rugby analogy before, we want people with different strengths. And I know I've referred to the book Rebel Ideas before in terms of, if you want to get away from group think, where you all come up with the same ideas and have the same beliefs and come from the same background, then you need as much diversity in your team as possible. And this is another way, another system with which you can ensure that you're getting diversity in the team. And in fact, one of the guys that I referred to when we did the Colby concept was a guy called Justin Bream, who sees everybody in numbers. He just said, he's the guy that approached me through LinkedIn originally and said, "Hi, 6392, I'm 7453," or whatever his Colby is. And Paul, I'll explain this a little bit more in a minute, but I appreciate the Colby bit's not going to make much sense. But he runs his business, and he knows that and his wife is his business partner. He knows that his wife, her highest strength is harmony, whereas that is in his bottom five. whereas he is, I think, probably an activator, for example. So that creates great diversity in a business. I know that Carol, my wife, would be high on empathy. So as a family, that provides us with good diversity. And it's about how can we boost that team building approach, but also your leadership and your strategic planning with understanding everybody better. And StrengthsFinder is definitely one of the ways that you can do that. And I think then that allows you to kind of take that to another level and go, well, okay, how can you, if everyone in the team understands everyone's strengths, you go, well, look, we need this doing, therefore, actually, this is a good person to take on this particular role. In the same way with a rugby team, you wouldn't give the prop the job of kicking the conversion. It's about finding those strengths within the team and going, well, okay, we know you need to do this because this is your expertise. But if we ask you in this way, you'll be more motivated to achieve it than in a different way. Now, we've talked about the Kolbe A index before, and I think this is an incredibly powerful tool in terms of understanding yourself, understanding your team members. And I think that this ties in really, really nicely with StrengthsFinder, because StrengthsFinder provides you with clarity on what individuals do best, which is your cognitive strengths, whereas Kolbe A index reveals how individuals naturally take action, which is your conative strengths. I think that's how you say it. So again, it's about building that role alignment more strongly by having an understanding of somebody's Kolbe and their StrengthsFinder. So for example, a person with a StrengthsFinder theme of strategic and a high Kolbe quick start can thrive in roles that require innovative thinking and rapid execution. So you can start to really drill down on that. And that's useful knowing about yourself or your team. So another example in this particular area would be if you think of a business owner that finds out that achiever is their one of their top strengths, which is about being driven to accomplish and be productive. And then if they also had a high score on fact finder, which is very much detail orientated and thorough, combining these insights would allow you to use the achiever strength to set and accomplish ambitious goals, but then utilize the fact finder element to meticulously plan those goals so that they actually execute them. So by understanding how these combine, you can be much more strategic in your team building. Then, if you remember, we talked about the print assessment. Now, the print assessment is about what's called our unconscious motivators. So I don't know if you remember, but I showed you the picture of the iceberg and the Kolbe A index, and the StrengthsFinder would be what we see above the water, whereas below the water is why we do what we do, and that's our unconscious motivators. And I think these three tools combine really well, and because ultimately the print assessment is identifying triggers that cause individual to operate at their best, or their best self as they call it, but also what triggers their worst behavior or their shadow self. So if we take an example of how we might use these two together, if a person with a StrengthsFinder theme of harmony and a print motivator of 10, which is to make a difference in the world, if you have both of those, then you could understand how their desire for peace and impact drives their behavior. So that would be one of the ways that you might be able to motivate them better. If we take another example, in that one, if we consider a business owner that discovers through StrengthsFinder that they're an activator again. So that activator like mine is eager to turn ideas into action. And then their print assessment is a number 2, which is to be needed and appreciated. So combining these insights, what we would do is potentially we could use activator strength to initiate and drive products forward, but we'd ensure that they receive, I receive appreciation and recognition for my efforts, because that will mean that I'm continually motivated and engaged to deliver. So that's different to if you know that it's harmony, and therefore, I'm not so motivated by significance and rewards. So again, combining these two allows you to get a better understanding of both yourself and your team. So if you want to go through Clifton Strengths Finder from Gallup, nowadays the easiest way to just do this is online. You can just go to gallup.com/Clifton Strengths. I can't remember how much it costs. Not very much money, like $50 or something like that. It might be a bit more if you buy the full
$60 now.
list. Pardon?
60 now.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it was a year ago but yeah, that sounds about right. So I would really recommend you do this yourself, just by way of understanding yourself better. But I would also then think about doing this as a team. Now, I don't think that Charlotte and Victoria, and certainly not Sarah, would have done this. So I think this is a really good thing for my team to do, which we haven't done since I came back to this. But I think it would be really valuable for me, because if we cycle back to Sir Alex Ferguson, if I know how, what particularly motivates Charlotte, Victoria, Sarah, etc., then I can be a better leader, and I can also assign them better tasks based on that information. So even if you did this, and I guess Kenny and Neil, you may have stumbled across this through strategic coach in the past. Even if you did this in the past, I think it's really valuable to go back and redo this. But I would also consider getting your partner to do it, and also your team to do it, because I think you'll understand so much more about yourself.